For a year, we've been talking about COVID, often forgetting about the important progress being made in other critical areas of medicine. What we now want to talk about is brand new technology that can enable the early detection of cancer. While additional trials will be required, the test known as HRC has shown incredible promise based on a 1,000-person clinical study. Now, the test has been developed by the Mumbai-based Epigeneres Biotechnology and Singapore-based Tzar labs. Leading this breakthrough, Ashish Tripathi, the founder of Tzar, and Anish Tripathi, the CEO of Epigeneres. They are, of course, both related to Amish Tripathi, the author. They're all brothers. And it's fantastic. I'm sorry that introduction was necessary, gentlemen, in as great a development that we see the two of you in. That said, how soon before the process of further trials and validation takes place before we find this essential testing technology in the market?
So Vishnu, there are further clinical trials already in progress, not just in India, but we are also in discussions for global trials with some of the largest CROs in the world. But that said, we intend to bring this technology to India first, and our aim is to have that introduced in India by the end of the year itself. This is, of course, something that needs regulatory approvals, etc., and we are talking to the right parties in the country, but we want to be able to launch this in India as soon as possible.
And Anish, what is the bottom line over here? Is it 25 cancers which can be detected early? Is that what you've been able to prove so far on the basis of your clinical tests in 1,000 candidates?
So 25 cancers is what we encountered in the 1,000-patient trial that we did. Our technology we claim that we can detect any type of cancer. There are around 180 types of cancers which are known to man, and our technology can detect each of those 180 types of cancers. 25 is mentioned because those were the number of cancers which were covered in the clinical trial that we did. And the reason for that is that the underlying genetic mutations, which is what we are testing for, are the same across all types of cancers in terms of the way we detect it.
Okay. And Ashish, how exactly does the test work? What are some of the key technologies that you have developed to reliably? And I'm told in your tests you've been 100% successful thus far in detecting cancers early. What is the technology based on?
Look, key to the breakthrough is actually isolating a certain set of cells in the blood called VSELs, which we detected. It's a kind of stem cell that we were able to detect for the first time within peripheral blood. Now, once we detected it, we were able to isolate certain transcriptomic markers from these cells, which are indicative of different types of cancer. So the fundamental way that this particular technology works is that this marker can actually not only tell you all the stages of cancer from the blood test, but it can actually tell you all the stages of non-cancer from the same blood test. So it actually identifies a marker and gives you a reading that you don't have cancer. And if it's within a safe zone, we can tell you that you don't have risk of cancer for the next 1 year. Now, this is not something that is being done by any of our competitors, right? The entire, and there are a couple of companies based out of the US where they are taking the absence of the cancer markers as indicative of non-cancer. That's a fundamental difference between their technology and ours. We get a reading for non-cancer, right? And that is the reason why their markers don't give the same kind of specificity or accuracy as our markers do.
And Anish, the bottom line over here, and a lot of people would be wanting to know more, is it's just a simple blood test, right? It's no different from any other blood test on the basis of which you can actually generate these results.
Yeah, unlike all the other tests which families who have, like ours, who have unfortunately been exposed to cancer, is that most tests are invasive, which means that either you have to go for a biopsy, which is something taking cells from inside the body, or you have to do a PET scan or a CT scan, which are dangerous in themselves in terms of the amount of radioactivity that you're exposed to. This is a very simple test. You go for a blood test. It's non-invasive. You give a sample of 5 ml of your blood, and we run the tests on that. Which is why our test is very different. It's non-invasive, therefore it's not harmful, and therefore the regulatory processes are likely to be much more simple than for invasive technology, which is what most cancer patients need to go through.
Ashish, how much would this test cost once it's in the market?
So Vishnu, that's
sorry,
the sorry, that's actually the most difficult question right now, because what I can assure you is that we are going to keep it extremely low. That's the ethos of the company. We want this particular test to be made available to every individual, and we want it to be affordable. What we envision is a world where all of us just need to do the HRC test once a year, and we will catch the cancer either at stage 1 or before, right? And so obviously it's very important that the pricing stays low. That said, there are certain challenges. This is a molecular test, so effectively we do need to actually get some data. We need to find out how the processes would work before we can actually come to the pricing. But I assure you, it is going to be low, and it's going to be the lowest in India.
Anish, the name HRC has a deep meaning for your family, doesn't it? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So since you mentioned Amish's name, the other person from the family who was relatively well known is my brother-in-law, Himanshu Roy. And this is something which is very core to the family, because his cancer occurred after 16 years. And that's the risk that cancer patients and cancer survivors carry, which is the risk of relapse. So the HRC word which we have taken is from Himanshu Roy Cancer Rating. That's a score that we have developed. This is dedicated to Himanshu, the brother-in-law. That's the reason why this has been named HRC.
Yeah, that's a very poignant reason to actually do this. And Ashish, I think the biggest sort of story, or the biggest aspect of what we're looking at is, if this goes on to continue achieving the success that you've had so far, it can qualitatively improve the lives of countless people. I mean, that's the bottom line, right?
Correct. It's, the reality is that if you come down to it, cancer is actually a weak disease if you catch it early. The challenge is that it gives very few signals, and if you catch it late, it causes untold pain to the patient, and a huge financial burden on their families and to the society at large. It is a major problem for the world, not just, it's already the largest killer in the Western world. There are 800 million people that die from this disease every year in India alone, right? And the fact of the matter is that if we can detect it early, we can significantly increase the rates of survival for people. And that is something very, very important for us. Anyone who knows someone who suffered from cancer will know that this is, the statistics are one thing, but the amount of pain and suffering it causes on families, it's something that the world needs to do more for. And we believe that we're making a very, very big step. You mentioned Himanshu. I will tell you that, I know that he's actually looking down at us and smiling at our work.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. Anish, so if this becomes part of common medical protocol around the world, if it achieves the sort of success that you're hoping that it does, would everybody, say once a year, be advised by their doctors, or every few years, or depending on their age group, go get a test done and let's see if everything checks out? Would that be what you're aiming for?
I would definitely hope so. This is what our dream is, that everyone should be able to do this test once a year and be relatively risk-free, which is why we say this is the world's first prognostic test. Having said that, our challenge, and in terms of the next thing that we need to do, Indian oncologists are amongst the best in the world. They're the most respected, the most experienced. And our job is to convince them that this test can make their life easier. And oncologists also undergo a lot of trauma, because when they treat patients, and they know that if this disease can be caught early, the chances of survival, the cost of treatment, the time of treatment can come down dramatically. And some of the oncologists who are on our medical advisory board they told us that if this test were to become successful and what we say ubiquitous, if that were to happen, then cancer, which is seen as a kind of a death sentence when people learn that they have somebody in the family who's been diagnosed with cancer, will become something that you just have to manage. And that is really the biggest change that we feel we will see in the way cancer is seen and treated across the world.
Yeah. Ashish, one final question to you. Could you tell us a little bit about the tests which have been done so far in the trial process? How rigid were these tests? What was the success rate that you were looking for? I know you achieved something phenomenal, but could you tell us about the tests? I mean, how robust were the tests?
So look, this was a blind sample test, and it was a multi-center test. So what we got was a blood sample with a code on it, right? Which is what Anish was talking about. The reality is that you're dependent on which cancers get sent to you in a blind study, and there were 25 different cancers sent to us. That said, we believe that we will have to do a much larger 10,000, 20,000 patient study, where we will actually have to cover all types of cancer, right? That's when this will become an all cancer test as such. The processes were fairly rigid, right? But that said, most Western authorities will want a test that is actually covering a lot of the Western countries as well, right? Before their regulatory authorities will accept this. So we are actually talking to global CROs, and that's got to be the next step. But the processes that were followed were extremely rigid, and the tests are what they are. I mean, the reality is, since the marker is so foolproof, we tend to get very, very high success results, right? But to be very candid with you, if you're actually sitting at 90% plus, you're actually sitting on a marker that is that will be considered very respectable by oncologists.
Sure. Which therefore would mean, Ashish, that it's a matter of time, right? Because in a clinical trial, to step up the numbers needs a lot of time. You know, we've seen, for example, even now during COVID, with all of the vaccines, for them to achieve phase 3 trial results needs time when you have a certain number of cases which come in, and then you start calculating. So for you to move to the next step, acceptance by global authorities, is it essentially now a matter of time, and that could be quite a while.
So the way we view it is, we're a company that wanted to make sure that we expose the science, right? And that is why we wanted to get published in a respectable journal, and we have been published in one of the largest stem cell magazines in the world. It's a Germany-based
Springer, yes.
Springer named us. So the science has been exposed. Now what's going to happen is that there will be follow-on tests that will be done independently, which is why it's considered peer-reviewed. But that said, once a blood test does not take a very long time for you to actually conduct a trial as such. So the Western studies, the way we would view it, is something that can be completed in the next 1.5 years, right? Of course, there are funding requirements, and that's something that we are working on. And we believe this particular technology holds a lot of promise.
Anish, how much time does it take before the results come in?
I'm assuming you're asking how much time does it take from the time a person gives a blood sample?
Yeah.
It takes around 3 to 4 days for the entire processing and the report to get generated. Having said that, we are working on some automation technologies which will allow us to scale. And if we're able to do that, we should be able to reduce it to 2 days, but it will still take 2 days.
And a final question to either one of you.
Yeah.
Assuming this moves in the direction that it's moving and you're ready to market it, would you market it using your own brands, Epigeneres or Tzar, or would we see this in the hands of some huge global pharma company?
So look, the plan is for us to actually create our own labs, right? The immediate plans are to actually roll it out in India. And but that said, there are companies that have approached us, And our intent is that we want this to be made available to the maximum number of people. So we will look at all avenues, right? But the current plans are to actually roll it out ourselves.
Well,
So
that's
Vishnu, if I can just add,
go ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead.
if I can just add, irrespective of who really brings it into the market in India or globally, what I can tell you is that the HRC test is what will be known to oncologists all over the world, and that will not change.
It won't change, and it's an incredible sense of pride that we have in all of you working, in your father as well, and the fact that these are Indians doing this at the cutting edge of science. It's almost unbelievable what you've achieved. It's striking. Let's just hope it all works out. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for being with us. Thanks.
Thank you so much.